All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we have Dr. Bright Mensa with us, and he would be talking about counterterrorism and counterinsurgency in Western Africa. Um, Dr. Bright is from Ghana. He has a PhD in international relations, and his areas of interest are African security, China-Africa relations, and intervention as well. Over to you, Dr. Bright.
Okay, good. I think this afternoon in Pakistan.
Yeah, it's afternoon here.
And it's still morning here in Ghana. So good morning and good afternoon to all of us. It's always a delight to join this kind of scholarly discussions so we can all, think about global issues and understand them better and see how we fit in them as scholars, as students, as practitioners, or as government officials, as the case may be. Today, I want to talk on the topic, the counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency in West Africa. And I'll be focusing on Ghana in terms of some of the strategies that Ghana has adopted in trying to deal with the insurgents or the issues of terrorism in the sub-region. As you may be aware, West Africa is seen to be the hotspot of terrorism. Even now, West Africa now is considered to be one of the hotspots, if not the main hotspot of terrorism across the entire world. And this is because even if the terrorists operate in other regions of the world, they still find a way to come to West Africa. So the key terrorist groups that we have in the world, they have their branches, they have their operations in West Africa. And that is why it appears West Africa is always in the news as far as terrorism or insurgency and all those kind of things are concerned. But before we start, let me look at the definitions. To be very frank, it is difficult to define terrorism. The scholars have not even agreed on a definition that we should all go by. This is very complicated because what a country may consider to be terrorism, another country may not consider it to be so. So one person may consider an action to be terrorist, another actor may consider that same action to be fighting for their right or freedom fighting or engaging in, defense of the state or what they believe in. So the problem of the definition is the fact that the action can be viewed from different. Those who support it do not call it terrorism, and those who don't support it call it terrorism. And so for our discussion, I must state from the beginning that the definitions that I'll be using are just reflective of what people say of the terms, not necessarily reflections of my own opinion about those groups as well. And terrorism in Africa has been here for a long time. In fact, it is not a current thing because even way back before independence, there were some terrorist movements or terrorist actions. At least that was how the colonial powers classified those actions. So for example, those of our freedom fighters, I'll call them freedom fighters, who were fighting for independence on the continent were classified to be terrorists. And popular among them was Nelson Mandela, who was the first Black African president of South Africa. He was labeled a terrorist for a long time. In fact, he was even removed from the terrorist list only in 2013 or so. So quite recently. And this is someone who has been fighting for his country. And he is now considered to be one of the noblemen, one of the statesmen of South Africa. But for a long time, he has been considered a terrorist. And it all depends on how you perceive or what you consider to be terrorism and insurgency. So like I said, what a country or what some people may consider to be terrorism may not be so in the eyes of other people. And again, we can also even bring to mind what is happening in Gaza. You know, the Hamas people may not consider themselves to be terrorists because they are fighting for what they believe in, and they actually even consider the state of Israel to be a terrorist state. And the state of Israel also considers Hamas to be a terrorist organization, and that they are defending whatever they believe in. So it all depends on where you stand, and there is no clear-cut definition. The UN tried, but they could not agree on a definition. But despite the ambiguity, despite the difficulty in definition, we still find that we can trace some elements of terrorism, some elements that would at least open our eyes to say that this could be terrorism. So, for example, an action that is, you know, the perpetration of criminal actions against civilians or individuals who are not even military people. And these actions could be murder, kidnapping, hostage taking, arson, and so many others, targeted at civilians, not military people. And these actions are also done in a way of spreading fear and intimidation among the people, even if not practically, but creating that fear in the minds of people that they cannot go out peacefully. If they go out, they could be bombed on the streets, they could be bombed in their mosques, they could be bombed in their churches, all those kind of thoughts. If they are able to create those thoughts in the minds of the people, then they are also terrorizing them. So they could also be classified as terrorists. And then a lot of the time also, these terrorist organizations, they have international connections. So some of these elements gives us an idea that this action could be a terrorist kind of action. For Ghana, if you look at our definition of terrorism, if you look at our, we have an Anti-Terrorism Act of 2008. We even expanded the definition of terrorism. The Ghanaian definition is very broad. It even includes acts such as polluting the environment that will harm the entire community. It also includes actions like maybe pouring chemicals into water bodies that will destroy, you know, community farming, livelihood, and all this kind of aquaculture and all that. And it also involves other things like maybe disrupting the internet in terms of breaking down the banking system, so people's monies can be, you know, lost in the system and all those kind of. All those actions, according to the Ghanaian laws, are also, you know, encapsulated under the definition of terrorism. So it is a very broad thing, and it's always expanding and all that. So apart even from the Nelson Mandela issue, we can also say that even in 1952, that's so many years before many African countries gained independence, there was a movement in Kenya. We call it the Mau Mau movement, where the local people stood and organized themselves and tried to chase out the British to leave their country. That war was considered by the British as a terrorist movement or something, but they do not consider it like that. So it has been there for a long time. However, during the Cold War and after the Cold War, we realized that terrorism on the continent has been changing its form. It is taking other motivating factors, not just for the sake of independence, but there are some religious motivations for that. People are engaging in acts for what they believe in, not just for the sake of their country that they want independence, but they're also doing so because they believe that it is their belief that if they do that, then some positive returns will come from that action and all that. So it has been there in Africa for a long time. That's a key point I want to make. And if you look at the African region, like I said earlier from the beginning, there are some key hotspots or areas where it appears the terrorism is kind of so endemic, and that is the West African sub-region. Unfortunately, that is where I'm from, but I'll talk more about that. And even within the West African sub-region, I must also say that it is not every country that is experiencing terrorism. And fortunately, Ghana has not experienced any terrorism activity in a foreseeable, past or something. We have not had it yet. And that is not to say that it could not happen as we are speaking right now. It could not happen tomorrow. or it will not happen another time. But so far, we are fortunate that we have escaped terrorist activities or bombing and all those kind of things. And later on, I will talk about some of the actions that we have taken to prevent some of those terrorist activities and insurgencies and all that, Ghana. But in West Africa,
just one thing. That's what I was,
sure.
When I was reading about it, that's what I was thinking, that you have Burkina Faso, Nigeria on top,
Yes.
Mali, Ivory Coast. Everywhere there has been terrorism happening. How Ghana is safe from here? And you mentioned it about it. So please, before going further, could you please talk about it a little? How Ghana has been, intact before from terrorism?
Yes, I must say that partly we are lucky because we cannot just tickle ourselves, but we are very good in our defense. But we are also lucky. But let me also say that our government over the years have been taking very proactive measures. And the measures that the country takes, it can be grouped into four areas. So the first one is we have been very, we have been very smart in taking steps that would prevent. So we call it a 3P and an R. 3P and an R, PPP and R. So we have been very, very straightforward in taking preventative measures. We are not waiting for terrorist actions to prevent any possibility of something like that happening. And what does that mean? We ensure that some of the motivating factors or factors that allow people to get radicalized, we neutralize them before they grow. So we don't encourage religious extremism in Ghana. You'll be surprised to know that Ghana, Muslims and Christians live like brothers. We do not have, fighting among us. Sometimes when Christians have programs, they invite the Muslim brothers. We come together, we sit together, we laugh, we joke around. We don't have any bitterness between all the main religious groups in Ghana. And it's the same when Muslims are having their programs, their friends are Christians, they all come around. And even in the political structure, we ensure that when we have a Christian president, our vice president is a Muslim. And then in terms of political positions, we spread it without, discriminating against anybody. So nobody feels left out. At least that's what I feel we have been doing. Because if you look at our political structure, every tribe, ethnicity, every religion, are all equally or fairly represented. And the government has been making sure that if a community feels that they are left out, that is given an urgent attention. They go in there, make sure that they feel included in the governance structure and all that. So inclusivity and also eradicating factors that could lead to radicalization. We try as much as possible to reduce some of those tensions. And then also, in terms of another risk factor is the youth unemployment. Try as much as possible to create opportunities for the youth and also make some monies available to those who want to start their businesses, those who want to go to school and all that. The government, even though it's not 100% effective in doing that, but at least they're trying their best to ensure that everybody feels included. That's the first P, so preventative measures. Then we also have what we call the preemptive measures, preemptive. So, and that is to ensure that if there is any possibility of terrorism or terrorist action, the community takes up the signal. So we have people who are listening, who are monitoring the system to ensure that we do not have anybody radicalizing the youth or nurturing any kind of radical thought or extremist thought and all that. So we try as much as possible to preempt the terrorist actions, and so that they don't fester. Because if they fester, it will be difficult to contain. So the best is to preempt, and if there's any possibility, you go there and neutralize the situation. So for example, last year, our neighboring country, Burkina Faso, had a problem close to our border side. Immediately, once our intelligence officers got wind of that, they mobilized a lot of soldiers. They went there to patrol the borders to ensure that we don't have any kind of incursions or intrusion of militants from our neighboring country, Burkina Faso, to come and either operate in Ghana or mobilize in Ghana or do any activity in Ghana. We don't allow that to happen. So even our neighbors know that we do not harbor other groups to come and mobilize in Ghana. So at least they know that once you enter Ghana, you're going to be dealt with, if not by the security forces, the community people are going to report to you, and nobody is going to allow you to group in Ghana. I think that is also something that has been helping us. Then the third P is to ensure that we protect all our key national infrastructure. So the key national infrastructure that we have, like our electricity grid and all that, we make sure that they are properly protected. So nobody comes in and bombs it and then plunges the entire country into darkness for days or months or weeks or anything like that. So that the things that actually can cause commotion, the key national infrastructure, will ensure that they are properly protected and are not exposed to terrorist groups, including our land borders as well, our airports, our harbors, our roads, key roads and all that. They are all protected to ensure that no terrorist group uses them. You know, as the doc, you know, one thing that you observe is that when you enter Ghana, from either Togo or Burkina Faso or Ivory Coast, the first few towns that you find, you always realize that there are a lot of security posts and checkpoints in all those places. So anybody who enters Ghana, you know, is going to be thoroughly checked. And the security forces are also very smart enough to know who actually is a Ghanaian and who is not a Ghanaian. We all look the same, but they know who is a Ghanaian and who is not a Ghanaian. They have a way of identifying such people. And then once they see you, they question you, they check your IDs, they check your belongings to ensure that you don't come with any radical or offensive weapons that you would be using against anybody in the country. So for now, these measures have been working. And the last one, which is R, is that they have also been, the government has also ensured that in case there is something that happens like that, in case there is a terrorist movement in Ghana like that, there is a quick response mechanism. So we respond to it immediately. And that also means that our disaster management are properly ready for any such things. You know, evacuations, you know, are done by the military or the police or anybody, the fire service, if there's any need for that. And then also the society is properly restored back to its normal life. So people don't live in perpetual fear that this is going to happen again and all that. So for us, I think these measures so far have worked, and that is how come we are surrounded by countries that are affected by terrorism, and yet we have not been affected yet. I keep emphasizing yet, because in our mindset, we know that anything is possible. They can attack any moment. And so we are ready. And, you know, so that when it comes, we are not taken by surprise. And then our officers are also able to restore the country back to normal as soon as possible. So for now, I think that has been working for us generally. Yeah. You know, even Burkina Faso recently has been,
yeah.
Yes, Burkina Faso recently has also been found to be the most affected country in the second most affected country by terrorism in the whole world. The second, only after Afghanistan. So it's quite interesting, and that also sometimes puts some kind of worry in the minds of people in Ghana that Burkina Faso, the most affected, and they are our neighbors. And then recently also we heard about Togo, and Nigeria also is the, you know, the home of Boko Haram. You know, so in Ghana we are, even though we have no evidence that they are here, but it's like we are always concerned. So the president also launched a program in 2019, which is see something, say something. So everybody's on the alert. You hear or you see something, you have to say it. Let everybody know that this is happening. Trying to perpetrate some wrong ideologies. The community must pick up that signal quickly yesterday that after invigilating an examination paper, I was told by a colleague that one of my students happens to be one of the DNI officers who is also among the students, making sure that nobody radicalizes anybody. So actually the country is very peaceful, but there are a lot of people who are working underground, making sure that nobody crosses the line. And if you cross the line, they deal with you before it becomes serious. So some of these measures have been working for us as a country. Yeah, so I think that is why Ghana appears to be like the odd one out. How do I say? The oasis in the desert, more or less. Let's put it that way. So the only peaceful country surrounded by terror-stricken countries. It's something that is good for us because it makes our country the go-to country in West Africa a lot of the time, especially in Christmas. Christmas is now like rebranded to be like something to celebrate in Ghana. So you realize that every December, a lot of our neighbors all come to Ghana for partying. They want to celebrate in Ghana because they know that in that celebration, nobody will come and bomb the crowd. So it is helping us also because with more people coming into the country, there's a lot of foreign revenue, like money coming into the country that is helping the economy and also making the country very attractive because people want to come to Ghana in December for Christmas. And a lot of the time, Christmas, especially in our capital in Accra, is not easy. So many partying going on at different places, all because everybody feels that Ghana is safe. You will not have any terrorists attacking anybody. You can go about your normal duties. If you don't have any bad mind, you're safe, you're okay, nobody will hurt you. So I think that has been one of the benefits that we have been deriving from the peace that we have so far. But nobody knows what is going to happen later. And we are all on the alert. Nobody is going to compromise on that. If anybody comes in and wants to radicalize, I don't think that's going to be tolerated. Muslims, the Muslim leadership also ensures that no radical idea is preached. You know, you don't have to hurt your brother because they don't believe in what you believe in. And Christians also have the same monitoring. So you don't go about and preach evil against your brother because they don't believe in whatever you believe in. So you can have your own belief, believe in it, practice whatever faith you have, but don't use your faith as a weapon to attack another person. So far, that is one of the key highlights of Ghana. All the religions are here, the traditionalists are also here, the Christians, the Muslims, and yet you will not see differences in treatment, you know, as far as political positions, as far as economic opportunities, as far as, you know, academic or any other opportunities are concerned. Everybody is given a fair share, consciously as national policy. Yeah. So that is good for us. So now let me go back to you know, the hotspots. So I was talking about Burkina Faso, or you may want to have another question also.
No, I don't have a question. I was just sorry for taking too long. You're deviating you from your lecture. So you can.
No, that's okay. It's also part of it. So I think I'll just have to move into that place before I go to another side.
I just wanted to make one announcement for the students. We will have a lecture and then we have a Q&A, and I would encourage all of you to ask your questions. And if you don't want to ask a question, you can write your question in chat and we can ask. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, so apart from Burkina Faso, another hotspot is Mali. And Mali, unfortunately, is suffering a lot, not only from one, but multiple terrorist groups. And a lot of them are affiliated to external, you know, terror groups like Al-Qaeda and all that. So they have connections with all of them. And there are new ones that are coming all the time. And one of the reasons why new ones are also emerging is because of the role of France in that sub-region. So there are terrorist groups that are emerging just to fight France and whatever they stand for in the sub-region. Because if you listen to the stories of West African countries that are former colonies of France, you would cry for them. a lot of them are still treated as colonial states, with France as a colonial master. A lot of things are wrong in those places, and some of them are fighting for what they believe they should be fighting for. And they are considered terrorist groups because, of course, the Western media controls the narrative, and so they'll say these are terrorist groups and all that. Yes, and then we also go to Niger or Niger, which is also afflicted by terrorist groups. But the one that actually makes the headline is Nigeria. Nigeria, Nigeria, because Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, the whole of Africa. I think the population of Nigeria is close to the population of Pakistan, or a little more. I don't know, but Nigeria has close to.
Yeah, there's back and forth always.
Hello?
Sometimes we are ahead, sometimes they are ahead. I think Pakistan has taken over Nigeria now. We have a Nigerian student here, and he could tell us later on.
Okay, that's great. So powerful. So Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and very essential economic powerhouse as well. So whatever happens in Nigeria affects the rest of the continent in significant ways, and Ghana is no exception. So the focus is also on Nigeria because of the insurgency, or the Boko Haram group, which has been afflicting the country for some time now. Yes. So Boko Haram, I think I'll talk briefly about Boko Haram, and then I'll talk about some of the counter-terrorist activities that are, being organized in the sub-region to curb the insurgency and all that. So Boko Haram is a group that was formed in 2002 by one of the Muslim brothers. His name is Yusuf, something like that. Mohammed Yusuf, something like that. He formed the group in 2002. Currently, the membership of Boko Haram keeps increasing and changing. So there is no fixed number on the militant, population, but estimates are that there are around 30,000 people who are operating mostly in the northern or the northeastern part of Nigeria. But from time to time, they make incursions into Cameroon also, and Chad, and Niger and other countries, and then make the operations over there. So what do they stand for? Boko Haram initially started as a group that was against everything Western. So even the name Boko Haram means that Western education is forbidden, or Western education is evil, is bad, is forbidden. So apart from the education, they stand for everything Western. They believe that the Western powers are actually exploiting Nigeria, and they are no force for good, that they must be dealt with. So initially, they started attacking these Western installations, government institutions, and even personnel. But later on, they changed their modus operandi. They started attacking civilians as well, killing innocent people, and even killing innocent Muslims. That's a key thing that we must keep in mind. So they are not only propagating the idea against Western religion, but they're also fighting against fellow Muslims who believe as, in bed with these kind of ideas. So if they find that a community of Muslims are sympathizers to this kind of Western ideas, they don't mind going to the community and killing the people. What actually brought them to the limelight was when in 2014, they went and probably kidnapped, abducted a lot of girls from a community called Chibok. They abducted about 276 girls, something that took the whole world by surprise, because how could they enter a community and abduct such a huge number of students, and for a long time they could not be traced. Some of those students were traced and returned, but it shocks the entire world that they could embark on such an operation and be successful, kidnapping over 200 girls and keeping them for a long time, and the security could not trace the whereabouts of those girls for a very long time, until some of them, ransoms were paid and then they were returned in exchange for some other prisoners and all that. So they have been very ruthless. Their leader has been very ruthless, was killed, and then another one was replaced. He too has been very ruthless. So the Nigerian government have been fighting, but they have not been so successful at preventing the damages that Boko Haram could inflict on the population. Right now, they seem to be weak a bit, but they have split into different other smaller groups, and some of them are fighting for additional objectives and aims and goals and all that. So they've carried out operations in Niger. They've carried out operations in Chad. They've bombed a lot of people, killing a lot of people in Niger. And then also in Central Africa, which is, they've killed people in Cameroon. They've killed people in Chad, you know. So it's like they keep expanding from Nigeria to Cameroon to Chad to Niger. It's like the fear is that if care is not taken, Boko Haram could expand to all part of West Africa, including Ghana. And that is our worry, because we do not want such a thing to happen to Ghana, or in fact, any other West African country. Already, they're also in Burkina Faso, some part of Burkina Faso, attacking people over there in those places. And apart from all the killings, they also engage in suicide bombing, so they can just go and blow themselves up. And then also raiding communities, taking the properties from them, and then slicing the throat of their men, leaving the women, or raping the women, killing the children and abducting them and incorporating them into the Boko Haram group and all that. So all these things have been happening in Nigeria. I'm sure maybe during the Q&A time, we can talk more on some of the issues in Nigeria. But as far as the sub-region is concerned, the West, before I conclude, the sub-region is concerned, what are some of the measures that they have been taking to ensure that they counter some of these terrorist organizations and their activities? And what are some of the counter-insurgency measures as well that they have been taking? So, unlike Ghana that has a coordinated policy since 2019, even though it's a new policy though, that's about just 4 or 5 years, it appears that the situation in other parts of West Africa is more complicated because they are already dealing with the problem. Ghana, we have time to plan our strategy to deal with all those kind of things, but the other countries, they are already plunged into it. So they are dealing with the situation. They're actually managing the situation, more or less. And what are some of their measures? First of all, they try as much as possible to coordinate intelligence information. So it's like from country to country, they try to work with other countries so that those who may want to move to one country to organize and later launch attack on another country would not be given the room to operate so easily. So I know Ghana and Nigeria has been having that kind of arrangement. There were some criminals that broke jail in Nigeria last year. They ran away from prison in last year. Some of them went to join Boko Haram. Some of them found their way in Ghana, but they were quickly arrested in Ghana and returned back to Nigeria. And so that kind of security arrangement and sharing of information is helpful so that they're able to deal with that kind of situation. Another key thing that I think the Nigerian government, as well as the sub-region, they are doing to deal with the issue of Boko Haram and terrorism is to know how those terrorist groups are funded. Because to be able to deal with them, you need to know the sources of funding. How are they able to get their weapons? Which countries are supplying them weapons? How are they able to survive, fight for so many years and yet not get the stock depleted? What is the chain of movement of some of those military hardware that they keep fighting, even to the extent that sometimes they appear to be winning the war against national governments? Terrorist groups, who supplies them weapons? How are they getting their supplies and all that? So I think they are trying as much as possible to research into some of those things. Some of them we know, some of the sources we know that because of their affiliation to other bigger terrorist groups, they get the supplies from them. some of them from Hezbollah, some of them from Al-Shabaab, some of them from other groups that sympathizes with their aspirations and goals. But I do believe that apart from these connections with other terrorist groups, there are other national states that may be supplying them weapons, because I don't think these terrorist groups also have enough weapons to be supplying others in Africa like that. So, but these are all things that must be investigated and properly found, so that if there are national states that are involved in training, supplying hardware, military hardware to some of these terrorist groups, they would be figured out and properly dealt with. I think this is a key thing that the countries in the sub-region are doing. Another thing is that they are trying as much as possible to train and equip the security forces. Some of the security forces go with, weapons that are no match to what the terrorists are having. So if you're a security officer and all that you have is a piston, like a small gun, and what do you call it? You are going to fight someone who is having a machine gun that can fire so many rounds in a minute. I mean, you stand no chance. Okay, so you only shoot maybe all your rounds and then pray to God, so that they can take your soul in peace, because that's basically what it is. So the African government are also trying as much as possible to get enough resources to equip the police and the military services, so that when they go and confront these Boko Haram and all militant groups, they can stand a chance of defeating them. In Nigeria, they are making some inroads. They have succeeded in, weakening Boko Haram at certain points in time. The only thing is that when that happens, it doesn't take long before they regroup and comes back. So some of these efforts must be consistent, must be continuous, so that they completely wipes out Boko Haram. But another key thing that I want to talk about is why, or what is the reason why these terrorist groups are coming in the first place? What are they hoping to achieve? And in order to ensure that they are defeated, you must understand what they are fighting for, and how do you deal with their needs. So for example, Boko Haram and many other terrorist groups, they feel that they have been excluded from the political system. They have sold their countries to Western powers. Their countries are no longer in their hands. They are now slaves in their own countries. But some of those economic underlying factors must be thoroughly considered and dealt with, so that those people will not be left out. And then I'm sure once those things are done, they would not have a strong motivation to go and take arms and engage in terrorist activities and all that. So, brother, this I believe are some of the steps that they are taking. I'm sure more will come up during the Q&A session as we go along.
Yeah, fascinating conversation, and you thoroughly encapsulated the situation there and the steps being taken to counter terrorism and counter insurgency. So I would ask my students, if you have a question, please raise your hand and then unmute your mic and introduce yourself and ask your question. So yes, we have from Hassan. Hassan, please ask your question. Please. Hassan, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, I hope everybody can hear me now. Yeah.
Yes.
My question is, we discussed about the threats of cross-border terrorism, particularly from the northern side, the northern borders, and particularly from Burkina Faso, which has been the hotbed in Africa and when it comes to insurgency. And of course, we discussed about Boko Haram from Nigeria and the other countries. There was this initiative. There have been several initiatives, particularly when we talk about Western Africa in the past. For example, we have seen the multinational joint task force that was initiated among some countries. Then we saw the G5 for the Sahel region. Likewise, 2019, I think the Ghanan government, the Peace Council, they came up with the national framework for preventing and countering violent extremism and terrorism in Ghana. That was focused in Ghana, but that was further expanded in shape of the Achar initiative, which took to counter particularly the Islamic State and the Jamiatul Nusratul Islam, JNIM. So, what is your thought process that this joint cooperation among the neighboring government has helped keep Ghana secure, or the initiatives, the framework that Ghana took to counter violent extremism has helped to keep the region secure, particularly the neighboring region of. And in addition to it, just another one is how the cooperation now, we have seen from the last couple of years the change of guard in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. We have seen the French. They've been out, and the Russians are taking over or supporting the governments there, the juntas. How is it helping the region in the framework that Ghana put forward and the initiative, and this particular task force that built up by these military junta in the three countries?
I think you've raised very important questions, two very important questions. The first one is whether or not the cooperation that Ghana is having with other countries, and then the inter-country kind of dialogue, the kind of cooperation that countries in the sub-region are having together, whether that is useful. And that is one of the reasons why Ghana has been kept safe. I think very, very importantly that this is one of the reasons why we have been kept safe. And for countries to exist side by side, they must understand that terrorism, is something that is always spreading. So if you keep yourself to yourself, if you just fold your arms and say, oh, it is not happening in my country, so I'm safe, before you realize it is happening at the heart of your country. So it is very important that all these countries work together, share intelligence, share information, and get to know what is happening in each other's countries. Because whenever there is a terrorist attack in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, or in Togo, we are also indirectly affected because a lot of our businessmen go to some of those countries, buy some goods, and come and sell in Ghana, or we also export some of our goods to those countries. So we want peace and in those places. And if there are terrorist activities going on in those places, we are directly affected. And for that matter, it is in our interest to share information to make sure that we put in place mechanisms that will prevent the spread of this terrorism. So, and the counter-terrorism framework that you refer to, it is which we passed in 2019, has been very effective in protecting our country. And that is why, before you realize, anytime we hear of something, our military quickly goes to the border, parades, and then make sure that they secure the entire region and prevent any inflow of personnel from those countries into the country. So I will agree with you by saying that this is useful to Ghana. It has been useful for us. It has prevented terrorism in Ghana over the years. However, as I keep saying, that is not to make our head or to make us feel very good about ourselves. We are always on the lookout, making sure that something as bad as that does not happen in Ghana. And if it does happen, we take quick responsive measures to prevent serious casualties or damages. So I agree with you, and I thank you for that question. The second one is what is happening in the Sahel region, where we see even Russia coming in, France also coming in, and all those kind of big powers are now playing, that kind of politics in the sub-region. You're asking if that is helping Ghana's effort at fighting terrorism, if I get your question right. I think that's what you mean. I think that what is happening in the sub-region is more or less an extension of what happened during the Cold War period, where those kind of powers come and play, rub shoulders on a continent. And it is not very good for us. Ghana is actually worried about that situation, that countries outside of the continent are coming to Africa to engage in acts that are in breach of the country's sovereignties. In actual fact, it is a breach of international sovereignty for another country to come to, Africa and engage in whatever thing they want to do without any invitation from the host government. So it is not something that we are happy about. But this is international politics. You don't get all that you're happy about. Sometimes things happen. And when they do happen, how do you respond to them? So for us, we are always on the lookout, gathering intelligence information. And I think so far, we can give credit to our security forces because they have prevented it so far. And until something happens, then we can begin to bash them. But for now, we can begin to applaud them for keeping the country safe from all those kind of infiltrations. And I do not support what Russia is doing. I do not support what France is doing, because whatever they are doing is actually creating more terrorist organizations. And then you also mentioned about the expansion from north to the south. It's the same thing. So we don't really support some of those Western countries or external countries, Russia also, coming into Africa and trying to rub shoulders in Africa. I mean, this is not something we in Africa are happy about. Yeah. I don't know if you got. Yeah.
Okay. I think you
Yes.
encapsulated it very well. You explained it very well. And yes, please. Who else has a question? Haris Muhammad from Nigeria, please.
Okay.
Please unmute yourself, Haris.
My question, sir, is that Nigeria is the most important. You hearing me,
we
sir?
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
My question is that Nigeria is the most important country politically and economically in West Africa, and rather than all over West African nation. So, sir, how can we imagine that Nigeria to become like Ghanaian politics and economically? How it will compare the Nigerian and the Ghanaian to become a peaceful and rather than all over in Western Africa?
Okay, very good question, my brother. You are right by saying that Nigeria is the most significant country in Africa, because apart from the population, Nigeria is also the country with the biggest economy, not only in West Africa, but the entire Africa, which means that whatever happens in Nigeria affects the entire world. Nigeria is more or less like India or China of Asia. Of every, 5 African, at least one is a Nigerian, which means that the influence of Nigeria cut across the entire continent, very significant. However, the issues of terrorist attacks keeps holding Nigeria back in terms of political, economic development and all that. So a lot of Nigerians, find it, much more easier to leave their country to the Western countries. So a lot of them are working in the US, in the UK, in Canada, in fact, all over the world, because even though they have a lot of opportunities that they can exploit within their country because of security, and then also the local police, I think is it a AFCC? I think there's a name for that. You should know that better. They are also not able to protect the individuals and guarantee prosperity at home. So the question is, what can Nigerians learn from Ghana? I think that's your question. I would say that the political side must be taken more seriously. The politicians must be able to spread economic development fairly and equitably without regard to religion, ethnicity, and location. And that is very important to me, because for me, I feel that is one of the key problems that Nigeria has. The citizens don't feel included. You know the issue of IPOB, where the Igbos feel isolated. And sometimes also when we have Christian president, how the northern side feels isolated. And all those kind of things must consciously be dealt with. Inclusivity in political governance is a key thing. Once that is done, all other things will follow. That's number one. And in terms of, interior or the Ministry of Interior, the internal matters, the security forces must also be very professional. The security forces must make sure that they deal with the terrorists and not, play loose, and then these terrorists will come and take their weapons, which sometimes happen, and then use the weapons to attack other people. And sometimes also the security forces must deal with the situation as it is. Because I have a feeling, and sometimes you'll be surprised to know that even a lot of Nigerians have the feeling that the security forces sometimes even, either support the terrorist groups in a certain way. Not all of them though, but they are not as professional as they should be. And I think that is something that we should deal with. The professionalism in the security forces is paramount. And then in addition to that also, they should make sure that they research more into the terror financing. They should find out who is financing Boko Haram and how they can cut short some of those supply lines, because Boko Haram has been there for a long time. It is not now that we should be looking at how they're able to get their supplies and all those kind of things. It's something that we should have found out long ago. And I'm sure that with a professional intelligence agency and all that, these things would have been dealt with, and then the supply lines cut so that they will not be continuously posing threats to the citizens, both in North and the South. I think those are some of the things. And then also collaborating with other countries in the sub-region. I think they should intensify things like that. And I know a lot of Nigerians who are also waiting and wishing for that to happen so that they can develop their country. Okay, they are in other countries not because they like, but because of the terror, because of the government problems and all that they face in the country. And I'm sure once they get these things right, politically, economically, socially, by making everybody feel integrated, I'm sure the peace and prosperity that Nigeria so desperately deserves would come to Nigeria. Because once Nigeria takes off, the whole of Africa will take off. The prosperity of Nigeria is the reason why Africa is also in the situation that they are. If Nigeria takes off, the whole continent will take off alongside. And we are also waiting desperately for that to happen in Nigeria. Yeah. I don't know if I tackle your question.
Yeah, you are the expert on Western Africa, so I hope I believe that you have explained it very well. We have Anas. Please, Anas, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks, Dr. Bright, for such an enlightening session. My question is pertaining global power interests in African region, and has it any implications on the situation of terrorism in Africa? As we know that Africa is resource-rich and potential market for global powers, particularly China. And has the influence of China curtailed terrorism, or is there any facet of global power rivalry in Africa? If there is any, kindly enlighten us on that. Thank you.
That's a very interesting question as well, on the role of global power politics and how that is influencing terrorism in West Africa or in Africa in general. I should say that it is happening. Like the earlier questioner asked, the role of Russia. Now we have the Wagner group also in the Mali, fighting alongside some of the groups to fight terrorism. Okay, and some of those terrorisms are also supported by other countries. Because like the global politics is now being played in Africa. So like they fight, but the battleground for these big powers appears to be taking place in Africa, unfortunately. So definitely, but it has also always been the case, even from the Cold War days, when the USSR and the US were at loggerheads and they were fighting this Cold War, the battlegrounds was, in most cases, Africa. And it's the same replication of the situation as it was during the Cold War days that we have now. So it is having that effect. I would not discount that. And I think that this is something that West African countries, and in fact, all African countries must be wary of. The position of non-alignment must be revived. Countries must not be taking sides with either the East or the West, because by doing so, they are only making their countries the battlegrounds for this kind of, so-called war and terror, and which actually is fueling more terror. Now you ask whether China, the investment China is having, whether that is also having any effect on terrorism. Well, I think that is a very gray area, because in the literature, you will not find Chinese also joining any terrorist groups or fighting. They are fighting for their economic investment, and I think that is distinguishable from terrorism. Yes, but in terms of the effect, we can also say that once there is no peace, the Chinese also not have the economic leverage or the ability to maximize the economy or the Mali. There are some times that Chinese businesses may have to reconsider doing certain things because of the security of the personnel, because of the security of the equipment, because of the safety of the investment and all that. So all these things are possibilities. But I think it is an interesting area that proper research must be conducted into to find out how Chinese investment is suffering as a result of terrorism, or how Chinese investment is fueling terrorism. These are all things that can be researched into. But for now, we don't have any proper research conducted in that.
Yeah, I just have a supplementary question with regards to China's investment.
Okay.
Since Pakistan has been, at the primary receiver of Chinese investment, and there are many projects where Chinese engineers and Chinese citizens are working in Pakistan. So recently, we not just recently, time and again, the Chinese are the target of terrorist organizations. They've been attacked, they've been assassinated, they've been murdered in Pakistan. So has there been some sort of resentment in areas in Ghana or in Western Africa where, because of the resentment, those terrorist groups started to retaliate or started targeting Chinese interests or Chinese citizens?
Well, in Ghana, I would say that this is happening on an individual basis, not as an organized group. So you find in communities where Chinese miners, in Ghana, we have a lot of mining enclaves in the forests areas and all that. So we have a lot of Chinese, we call it galamsey. It's a local term, which means illegal mining. So the Chinese are involved in this kind of illegal mining. And sometimes when they destroy something, the locals retaliate. So it becomes some kind of fighting between the locals and the Chinese. That is different from terrorism, which is more or less like an organized action for a bigger objective. So yes, this happened, but I would not classify them under bigger concept of terrorism. But I would just say that maybe people are having to defend themselves or their interests, which is not coordinated or organized under any terrorist group or name or brand or something. But these things happen where there are clashes between Chinese and the locals. Apart from the physical confrontations, you can also monitor on the radios, on the TVs, on the internet, and other media platforms that the relationship between China and Africans or Ghanaians is kind of mixed. It's a mixture of anger and sometimes satisfaction. It's a mixture of everything. It is not just one way, because while they may be angry at certain investment or some certain actions taken by Chinese, they also know very well that the Chinese are better alternatives than what happened to them in the past. So it's a mixture, or it's a mixed kind of relationship or reaction towards a relationship between Africa and China. In some instances, they are partners, they are friends. But sometimes when they go to the extreme, the frustration is also vented out. So it's more or less a mixture of all the sentiment, not just one.
Fascinating. Yes, anyone else who has the question, please shoot your question. Raise your hand, or you can unmute and ask your question, or you can write down in the chat. We can take, it's almost time. We're gonna take like one last question. If there is no question, then we can end it here. I think we don't have any other question. Dr. Bright, thank you so very much. I really appreciate you spared your time, and you're so kind. You're always available whenever I ask you. And I really appreciate you came and you enlightened our students. And I hope students learned something about Africa and what is happening in Africa in terms of counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, and at the same time, how these terrorist groups are operating there and how the countries are taking actions against them. And if we look at the situation, we can say that as part of the third world, Pakistan also faces the same sort of situation, or the events that are happening are no different than Africa as well. Yeah, we have a question from our student Mariam. Yes, Mariam, please.
Hello, sir. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, sir, I have a question. Like it just popped up in my mind in the last moment, and it is this that the conflict, peace, and security reality in Africa, has experienced most important changes in the last decades. And what is the balance of EU's role in the process of targeting peace and security architecture in Africa, like the international organizations such as UN, EU? Like what is the role of there in this stabilizing the security challenges in Africa, and what aspects should be assessed in this regard in the medium and in the long term?
Very important
Thank
question.
you.
So I'll put all the organizations into one. So let's say the EU, the UN, and many other international organizations. What is their role in security and peace on the African continent? I think that's a question. So
yes.
This is a very interesting one, because a lot of the time, even when you come to the African continent, the African Union, they have been heavily supported by these organizations that you mentioned. A lot of our funding comes from the EU. A lot of our funding comes from the member state as well, but significantly it comes from the EU, the World Bank, and the UN as well. So in terms of peacekeeping and peace enforcement in conflict-stricken communities, the African Union can dispatch peacekeepers, and a lot of the time, peacekeepers from Ghana and the other countries in the sub-region go to those places to go and keep the peace. So, and their funding comes from the UN, comes from the African Union, comes from other partners that you mentioned, the EU and others. So that is their role. They contribute financially. They also contribute in terms of, sometimes training or joint operations, so that at least they can, train our people on some of the advanced methods of counter-terrorism, or preventing wars and all those kind of things. So these are happening. So a lot of the time is the money. You're talking about the roles. So a lot of the time is the money, their training, their intelligence also, because these are countries that have advanced technology in monitoring areas all across the vast terrains in the Sahara Desert and other part of Africa. So they can monitor from whatever source anything that is happening, and they give the intelligence information to the people they need to give it to. So yeah, I would say their role is not that profound, but nevertheless significant, where they support financially in terms of equipment, also in terms of training, they've been there. Yes, they in nominal terms they are there, but as to whether or not these contributions from the EU, from the UN are very effective, we can have an argument on some of those things. Whether or not their roles are actually achieving the objectives that they want it to achieve, it's a different discussion. But nominally, we can say, yes, they are giving their money, they're giving their weapons. Sometimes you'll be surprised to know that the weapons they're giving to our security forces are also the weapons that the terrorists are using to fight. So, but it's interesting. We can have further discussions on some of these things later, because you know it's not straightforward. It's kind of complicated.
Yeah, I think you, Mariam, you got the answer, I think. Thank you so much, Dr. Bright, and thank you everybody for joining. And yeah, we have a Ramadan, and we are getting closer to the time of breaking our fast, and most of the students must have to prepare for that as well. So I think we should end our conversation right now here. And Dr. Bright, again, thank you so much. You're always kind, and see you again, inshallah. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity once again.
All right. Take care. See you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye-bye. Bye.